your secretary to confirm the quorum?
Chair, we do.
Recording in
Chair,
progress.
So I'll proceed with the roll call, Chair, if that's okay.
Proceed. Thank you.
Chair, Ms. Mwatse, Chair. Chair, Ms. Mwatse is on the platform, Chair.
Yes, Andre.
Okay.
Morning,
Chair.
Chairperson. Morning, everyone. I'm present.
Good morning.
Chair, Ms. Malamatia, Mr. Malamatia, Chair.
Morning, Chairperson. Morning, Secretary. I'm present.
Morning.
Mr. Mumbayani, Chair.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, colleagues. I'm present. Thank you.
Good morning.
Chair, Ms. Yaku, Chair.
Morning, Chair. I'm going to try and find a better network so that I can be able to show my video next time we deliberate.
Thank you. And good morning.
Chair, Mr. Mulder, Chair.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, all. I'm present.
Good morning.
Chair, Mr. Cuthbert, Chair.
Good morning, Chair.
Good morning.
Chair, Ms. Mutahum, Chair.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, everyone. I'm present.
Good morning.
Chair, Mr. Burns Ngamase, Chair.
Molo sihlalo namalungu ekomiti namubonga abantu ndikhona.
Good morning.
Chair, currently those are all members on the platform. I'm assuming others will join us. They may have connectivity challenges, Chair. And if I receive an apology, I will indicate you. Mr. Thing just joined us, Chair, as we speak.
Morning, Chair. Morning, colleagues. I joined about 5 minutes ago, Andre. You may have missed me. But good morning.
Okay.
Okay. Anyway, leaders are never late. You just delayed. Good morning. Can we flight the agenda, please? Thank you very much. There is the agenda. It's opening and welcome. Apologies. Adoption of the agenda. Then we'll have the briefing by the Special Investigation Unit, Investigating Unit, on the status of its investigation into allegations of corruption at the National Lotteries Commission. We'll have a short break, 15-minute break, and then continue discussions. Then we will look at the draft program. We will explain to PC when we get there why we are looking at possible changes to our program, and then closing remarks. So we should conclude by 2. So I have already welcomed everyone on this platform, and I declare this meeting open. We know that the President, in his commitment to South Africa to fight corruption, issued a proclamation on the 6th of November 2020, with specific reference to the NLC, investigating the NLC. The period of investigation was determined to be from the 1st of January 2014 until the 6th of November 2014. The scope of the investigation, according to the proclamation, refers to maladministration in terms of the affairs of the NLC in relation to, number 1, the investment of funds of the National Lottery Distribution Trust Fund, established in terms of Section 21 of the National Lotteries Act, number 57 of 1997, contrary to the applicable provisions of the Lotteries Act. And secondly, the allocation of money in the fund to beneficiaries who are not entitled thereto in terms of the applicable provisions of the Lotteries Act 1997. Therefore, the purpose of this meeting today is to receive a status report from the SIU. We know that you haven't concluded your work, but we're asking for a status report on your investigations into the allegations of corruption at the National Lotteries Commission. So I see the SIU is led by their unit head, the SIU unit head, Ms. Advocate Motibi. So I'll hand over to you, Advocate Motibi, and your team. We note also that the department is also represented on this platform by the acting COO and the Chief Director of Audit. Thank you very much. Can we proceed? Andre, is Advocate Motibi on the platform?
He's on the platform, Chair. You will see him there. He's on the platform. And
thank you.
No problem, Chair.
Right. Thank you very much, Honourable Chair and Honourable members of the Portfolio Committee. We appreciate the opportunity to come and present to this Honourable Committee on the status of our investigations into the National Lotteries Commission. As you correctly mentioned, Honourable Chair, the investigation is still ongoing. We're hoping to conclude, and we will indicate in the body of the presentation, we're hoping to conclude part 1 of the investigation by the end of March, and the report will reach the President in April, following which, if the President makes it public, or the committee could obtain a copy from the Presidency. I would like to just start off, Honourable Chair, if you permit, by introducing the team members from SIU that are attending with me. I'm joined by the following members. I'm joined by Mr. Leonard Lekgetho, who will be doing the presentation with me. He's the Chief National Investigations Officer. These investigations is conducted under his guidance with a team of investigators under him. We're also joined by Mr. Kaiser Khanyaho. He is the Head of Communications and Stakeholder Relations and the spokesperson for the SIU. We're also joined by Mr. Mashudu Nachikweta. He's the Specialist Forensic Investigator reporting to Mr. Lekgetho. We're also joined by Mr. Nelson Mataba. He is the Principal Forensic Legal Advisor. He advises the team that's investigating so that ultimately we reach the appropriate legal outcomes. We are also joined by Ms. Rehani Hardegen. She is also a head of investigations based in Mpumalanga, but she is attached to this investigation just to help out the team. Those are the members from SIU that are joining this meeting today. I'm going to ask Mr. Lekgetho, assuming he's been given the rights, to reflect the presentation. Thank you. We'll go to the next slide.
Can we just go to slide mode?
Mr. Lekgetho, are you in slide mode, Mr. Lekgetho, please? Mr. Lekgetho, can you hear us? Slide mode, please confirm if it's in slide mode.
Or PowerPoint mode. so that we don't see your border of your program that you're working in. If it's not possible, then please proceed.
I want to confirm Mr. Lakhato,
so it's full
yes,
screen.
Sorry, Chairperson, the presentation is on a PDF, so it's not a presentation. It's not in a slide mode. It's in a presentation. It's in a PDF format.
Okay, it's probably a technical issue that because we have prepared a PowerPoint presentation. It's in slide formats. Perhaps it's just from our side that perhaps as PDF as it is, whether we are not able to convert it to a slide mode or. But Honourable Chair.
It is visible, so you can proceed.
Is it visible? Thank you very much. We appreciate that indulgence. We may proceed. This presentation outline will touch on the legislative mandate and not go into detail, as the Honourable Committee is familiar with the legislative mandate. And then we'll touch on the SIU operating model, mainly referring to the outcomes that we seek to reach as we investigate. And then we will go into the proclamation itself, where Mr. Lakhato will then pick up and go direct into the status of the investigations. Next slide, please. The legislative mandate, Honourable Chair and Honourable Members, as it's known to the Honourable Committee, the SIU is enabled by the Special Investigating Units and Special Tribunals Act of 74 of 1996. That's really the one that regulates our business in terms of investigations and other outcomes. We also take into account other legislations. We really just made mention there of the Criminal Procedure Act, because often we reach criminal law outcomes which have to be dealt with in terms of the Criminal Procedure Act. And when we investigate, because often we investigate allegations of corruption, we then take into account the Prevention and Combating of Corrupt Activities Act. Our major function, bottom left, includes, as I indicated, to investigate corruption, malpractice, and maladministration. We ultimately institute civil proceedings. Within our powers is those powers that really are granted to any of the law enforcement agencies to enable us to do our work, able to subpoena, search, and seize for evidence. And we also, as I indicated, ultimately institute civil litigation to recover the state funds or to prevent future losses. We, as SIU, where there's a need to arrest, we then enlist the services of the Hawks or SAPS, and where there is a need for prosecution to follow. In our case, the legislation says when we pick up evidence pointing to criminal offense, we then refer to NPA. Out of our scope is also the actual implementation of disciplinary action. While we do collect evidence, and I'll come back again to that, it is the accounting officer or accounting authority that has the responsibility to implement the disciplinary actions. Well, we work closely with other relevant agencies where we really need to. Next slide, please. Not spend a lot of time on this, but our vision as we do our work, we would like us to achieve a vision where SIU is a preferred and trusted anti-corruption, forensic investigation, and litigation agency. This, we say so because we know that we are competing with private companies out there that conduct similar work that we do, but we would like to be preferred, and we know that to be preferred, we have to bring our part. We have to investigate effectively, adequately, speedily, bring out legally sound outcomes. So that is what we are geared up to achieve based on the strategy we have adopted. We've got our mission there, and then our work is values-based. Integrity is at the center of what we do. We also would like our teams and the stakeholders to cooperate. Teamwork, professionalism, efficiency, independence, and drive and passion. Next slide, please. Honorable Chair, these are some of the consequences or the outcomes I would have mentioned above. I would like to just spend a few minutes on this one, because the rest of the presentation is going to be mentioning all of these in terms of the outcomes that we reach. So the civil litigation part, it's areas where there is a need. Once we have found that the state has lost money as a result of an action, either of an official or a state institution, we then institute civil litigation. We are legislatively empowered to start and end that process, to institute civil proceedings where there are potential recoveries of assets. We also apply for preservation orders. This is where we freeze assets at an early stage of the investigation where there is a prima facie evidence. So in this space, that's where we ensure that we approach the special tribunal since its inception in 2019. Before then, we were approaching the high courts, but because we've realized that there's delays at the high courts, the president then proclaimed the special tribunal in 2019, and we have seen the value of that. The speeding of litigation, the speeding of all those preservation orders. Now, the disciplinary action and referrals to state institution, I've already sort of touched on this, where there is evidence that we pick up pointing that anyone, whether it's an official or an accounting authority, whether it's a board member or any other level, we then take that evidence, we package it and deliver it to the state institution, to the accounting authority or accounting officer, so that action can be taken. We do support that process by providing witnesses from our investigators so that that process can be successful. And the next slide, the next block, it's the legislation says where we pick up evidence that points to the commission of an offense. The legislative injunction is that we must refer that evidence to NPA. And we will be indicating in the presentation how many referrals are we likely to make to the NPA in this regard. And then, of course, we pick up evidence as we do the investigation that there's other regulatory infractions by various entities or by various companies. In this case, various non-profit organizations, non-profit companies, and so on, and other professionals like legal practitioners and all those others. In that case, we then take the evidence, we refer it to the regulatory authorities that are charged with the authority to deal with those infractions. And we do follow up and support with the evidence to an extent that it is dealt with adequately. The bottom line there that says systemic recommendations, if our investigations often reveal either failure of governance processes, failure of systems, failure of people, failure of processes, and so on. So as we investigate maladministration, ultimately, as one of the main outcomes is to assist ultimately with the improvement of the administration, then we make this systemic recommendation to improve on the system. And that we've got a function in SIU that, so when the investigators are done, they hand over to that function where the systemic recommendations are engaged with with the state institution so that the system can be improved. So Honorable Chair and Honorable Members, this is pretty much the outcomes that we seek to reach speedily so that there is consequence management at the end. I'm going to then to the next slide. This is where my colleague, Mr. Lekgetho, will start to pick up. This proclamation was proclaimed by the President following the allegations that were received by SIU. So the process that we follow is that when we receive the allegations, we then consider them against the legislative provisions, and we then, when we are satisfied that there is a basis to investigate, we draft the proclamation. It goes through the process until it's signed off by the President. So Proclamation 32 of 2020 authorized SIU to investigate into the National Lotteries Commission. At this stage, Honorable Chair, I'll hand over to my colleague, Mr. Lekgetho, to proceed with the status and other outcomes that we have reached to date. I need to just mention, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members, that because this is a status report, the investigation has not been concluded, but in those instances where we have concluded a particular focus area to enable us to reach an outcome, whether to investigate or to implement civil litigation or to send for a disciplinary action or to refer to the NPA and so on, we do action those as and when they are referred, as and when the evidence is picked up. So we don't wait until at the end when we submit the report for those actions to be taken. And only when those actions are public are we able to mention the names. So in this presentation, where we mention the names, it would be instances where those actions have been made public. For example, there's a slide that will deal with the preservation orders that we obtained from the special tribunal. Then we are mentioning the names of the companies or NPOs simply because they are public. So in other areas, we've redacted the names, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members, just to guard against the legal risk and also not to compromise the investigations going forward and the possible outcomes that may be reached. I thought I would mention this to the Honorable Committee. When we complete, as I said, when we complete phase one, we will do a detailed report. And in that detailed report, there will be names, there will be actions that we've taken, and that the phase one report is scheduled to reach the President in April. So the committee would probably be made, it will be made available to the committee, and all of the details will be in that report. Mr. Lekgetho, I pause here and hand over to you, sir.
Over to you, Mr. Lekgetho.
Thank you, Chair.
No. Thanks, Advocate, and thanks, the Chairperson, and thanks, Honorable Member. I will be continuing the presentation as indicated. Chairperson, with your permission, I'm going to ask that I switch off the camera so that I can save the bandwidth. If I continue with the background, Chairperson, when you started, you clearly outlined the background as to how the proclamation came and what are the issues that we are required to investigate. So I'm not going to go through it because you have clearly outlined it. Then I'll go to slide number 10. Maybe just before I start, Chairperson, I just need to outline so that the committee can be able to follow the presentation. The presentation is dealing with former board member, and it also deals with an official of NLC that are involved in some of these allegations that we have investigated. So you'll see that we have mentioned former board member, of which is going to be former board member 1, and there's also former board member 2, so that you can able to follow. Then we've got senior official or official of NLC. So that's how we tackle some of the members in the presentation. So starting with slide number 10, it's investigation into former board member 1 who resigned. And this former board member was appointed as a non-executive member to serve on the NLC board from 20 April 2017 by the then Minister of Trade and Industry. And his period of appointment was for 5 years with effective from April 2017 ending in 13 March 2022. And this same former board member, we have identified that he is a trustee of one of the trusts and is also a sole director of a group of companies. And during the presentation, we'll outline some of the companies that benefited out of the company that benefited out of the NPO of that received granting from NLC. So we'll start with the NPO1 and we'll deal with the money laundering by the former board member. And the investigation has identified that the identity of the NPO1 was hijacked and 23 million grant funding was paid to the NPO. And the purpose of the grant was to build an old-age home in Mpumalanga. The project was started but not completed as the fund allocated to the project were redirected to individuals connected to NLC. The investigation has revealed that 5 million of the 23 million received from the NLC went into the bank of the NPO1, was transferred to one attorney of the group of company belonging to the former board member for the transfer of a luxury immovable property in favor of their clients. Here we're still talking about the former board member 1 who received 5 million, and that 5 million went to the transfer of a luxury immovable property to that member. Then still continue with the money laundering by the former board member. So on the 6th of December 2017, the family trust paid 565,000 from its account to the former board member's private account. And on 29 January 2020, further 300,000 was paid to an unidentified bank account. The reference for payment has been identified as that of the former board member. On the 9th of September 2016, NPO2 now submitted an application for grant funding for construction of a drug rehabilitation center. And on the 7th of October 2016, the application was approved for funding of 17 million. And on 20 October 2016, 2 days after the signing of the agreement by NLC and NPO2, NPO2 appointed a company linked to one of the senior officials of NLC for the construction and refurbishment of the rehabilitation center. And on the 22nd November 2016, a day after the NPO received a payment of 7.5 million into their account, 3.3 million was transferred to the appointed company linked to the senior official of NLC. And on the same day, the same company transferred 1 million into the private bank account of the former board member 1. It should be noted that the company appointed by NPO2 was owned by the brother to one of the senior officials of NLC. So what happened is that the NLC granted fund to NPO2, and NPO2 appointed the brother to one of the senior officials of NLC. NPO2 submitted application to the NLC to build a new drug rehabilitation center in Gauteng, and the NPO refurbish and build extra building structure to an existing rehabilitation center. Here is just to indicate that the only work that they did, they just refurbish and build extra building structure to an existing drug rehabilitation center. Mind you that they received a huge sum of money. Then going back to NPO8, NPC 1. On 19 October 2016, NPC 1 received grant funding of about 7.5 million from NLC. And on 29 November 2016, a further grant of 7.5 million was paid by NLC to NPC. The purpose of the grant application was to build a drug rehabilitation center in Mpumalanga. The construction of the center was ongoing in 2021 when SIU visited the area for site inspection and interview. And on December 2016, the NPC 1 transferred an amount of 3.4 million into the bank account of a company owned by the brother of the senior official of NLC. And on the following day, that is 2nd of December 2016, the same company transferred 1 million to the former board member's bank account. That's former board member 1. The construction of drug rehabilitation center was still ongoing when SIU visited the center in November 2021. And mind you, the grant funding was approved in 2016, but even now it's still ongoing, the building. Then conflict of interest by former board member 1. The SIU investigation has revealed that during the period March to May 2018, the former board member received a total of 5.4 million into his personal bond account from various NPOs. The bond was for his primary residence house that is situated in Gauteng. It has been determined that the NPO and NPO 3, that is NPO 3, received grant from NLC to the tune of 8 million in 2015. And the NPO 3 was used as a conduit to make an application on behalf of another NPO. The purpose of the application was to develop women in the Eastern Cape. NPO 3 also received funds from hijacked NPO, then transfer some of the funds into certain NLC officials. Still on NPO 3, the SIU has determined that upon receipt of grant funding from NLC, the hijacked NPOs transfer money to one of the key role players' bank account. And on the 28th of March 2018, NPO 3 paid 2 million of the 5.4 million paid into the personal bond account of the former board member 1. Here we're still talking about the former board member 1 and in relation to his conflict and the benefit that he has received out of the NPO that received grant from NLC. Then NPO 4, during the period 2015 to 2018, NPO 4 received 3 NLC grants to the value of 6.4 million. Then NPO 4 transferred 1.4 million to one known company. And on the 4th of April 2018, the known company transferred 1.9 to one former board member's personal bank account. Here we're still talking about the very same former board member 1. An investigation now into former board member 2. Now we are dealing with another former board member. On the 6th of March 2018, board member 2 signed an agreement of sale as a purchaser of a property in Gauteng for 27 million. A deposit in the amount of 25 million was paid by the former board member 2 into the trust account of one conveyancing attorney. And NPO 5 applied for a grant funding for the construction of an old age home to NLC. The application was approved and a grant funding of 23 million was approved by NLC. And on 16 October 2017, the NLC effected a payment of 20 million into the NPO 5 bank account. Construction of the old age home was started, but the construction remained incomplete until today. And on 20 October 2017, NPO 5 transferred 11.7 million to one company belonging to one of the key role players who ultimately transfer an amount of 9.2 million to the conveyancing attorney of the former board member 2. The money was part of the deposit paid towards the property purchased by the former board member 2. And former board member 2 further received 1 million from the company owned by the brother of one senior official of NLC for the deposit of a luxury vehicle. And it is clear that the company belonging to the brother of one senior official of NLC was used as a vehicle to launder money received by NPOs from NLC. Now dealing with NPO 6. NPO 6 applied for grant funding in 2016-17 for construction of athletic tracks in Northern Cape. The application was approved and a grant funding to the value of 15 million was approved. NPO 6 and NLC signed a grant agreement on 26 February 2018. NLC effected payments of 50 million into the account of the NPO 6 on 7 March 2018. The initial 15 million granted to the NPO was misused. The project only started when NLC granted further 4.2 million into the NPO. NPO 6 paid 10 million to one known company. On the same day, the money was paid into the account. And on the 14th of March 2018, the known company paid an amount of 2.5 million to the conveyancing attorney of the former board member 2. Remember, the former board member 2 purchased a property to the value of 27 million. So all this money was going to the same attorney so that it can go for the purchasing of that property belonging to the former board member 2. Then the former board member 2 also received 4 million from NPO 7 through his attorney in order to purchase the very same property, which is worth 27 million. Then investigation to the senior official of NLC. The senior official of NLC was involved in a number of business activities with individuals and entities that are directly or indirectly benefiting from NLC grants. We have identified the key individuals involved. During 2015 to 2016, both senior officials of NLC and one known individual, they've registered 2 trusts. Tabled in the next slides are the NPO that transfer money to one of the trust account, which was established by the NLC official and one individual. So if you can see here in the right, extreme right, you see that the NPO or entity, and on the other side is the amount received from those NPO and the NPC. You can see the first one, the NPC 2 transfer 1 million into the trust account. Then there's a private company, which also private company received money from one of the NPO. And after receiving money from the NPO, that private company transferred 2.9 into the trust account. And private company 2 also received money from the NPO. And after that, it transferred 3 million into the trust account. Then together with private company 3, transfer 1.4, private company 4 transfer 850,000, then private company 5 transfer 1 million, private company 6 transfer 3.7 million, and private company 7 transfer 100,000. So all this private company received money from the NPO, and after receiving money from the NPO, then it transferred the money into the trust account that is owned by one individual and one senior official of NLC. After the trust received funds from the NLC NPO, the funds were further redistributed to senior official of NLC personal account and other family business. As you can see that the money went into the trust account. After the trust account, then the money is being paid now into the officials, senior officials of NLC and some of the family businesses. You can see that a private company was received 240,000, and a family trust received 1.2 million. A restaurant received 560, and private company 8, and just like that, all of those money were received from the trust account. Then company belonging to the brother of one senior official of NLC. The company was established by the elder brother to the senior official of NLC in 2016, and the elder brother resigned as a member in March 2017. The directorship still remain in the close circle of friends and family members of NLC official. I think that was done maybe just because so that the link should not be known, but company was established by the brother. And table in the next slide showed the NPO debt transfer money to the company belonging to the brother of one senior official of NLC. As you can see, the slide might be, the writing might be small, but you can see that private company 10 transferred 560,000, and private company 6 transferred 2.7, private company 10 transferred 150,000, and NPO 10 transferred 2.3, private company 1 transferred 1.1 million, and family trust transfer 950,000, and private company 11 transfer 1.5 million, and private company 5 transfer 2.5 million, and NPO 10 transfer 4 million, private company 4 transfer 2.3, private company, I don't see the number there, transfer 300,000, and private company 3 transfer 5.9 million, and private company 3 transfer 2.7, and NPO 2 transfer 3.5, NPC 3 transfer 4 million. And the total value of transaction that was received by the company owned by the brother of one senior official of NLC is 34.8 million. And during the period 3 March 2016 to 11 July 2018, the company of the brother of one of the senior officials of NLC paid a total of 5.6 million to the benefit of senior officials and the entity linked to his family. The table below shows the amount received from the company to the official. So what happened is that NPO transfer money to the trust account. Then from the trust account, the money is transferred to the company owned by the brother of one senior official of NLC. Then from the company that's owned by the brother of senior official of NLC, now they transfer this money to the benefit of the official of NLC. You can see 19 May, 3.5 was paid for school payments for the son of that official, and 24 May, 830 was paid for the maths lessons. 19 July 27, 100,000 was paid into the official's bank account. 1 July, 37,000 is paid. 27 March, 1.6 is paid to a travel agency company. And 24 December, 200,000 is paid. And 26 April 2016, 100,000 is paid. 19 July, 1.5 is paid into the farming business. And 12 October 2017, 50,000 is paid into the family trust belonging to that official of NLC. Now dealing with NPO 6. In 2015, the NPO 6 submitted an application for grant funding to NLC for an amount of 25 million. The application was unsuccessful. And in 2018, the NPO 6 submitted a second application for grant funding for the construction of athletic tracks in Northwest and Northern Cape province. The application was approved, grant funding to the value of 50 million and was granted to the NPO 6. Then finding is that upon receipt of the funding, 10 million was transferred to one known entity's bank account. 5 million was used for personal capacity, and one senior official of NLC submitted a motivation to NLC for additional funding of 4.2 million to be issued to the NPO, and the request was subsequently approved. And NLC paid NPO 6 a total of 19 million, of which 15 million grant funding and additional 4.2, which was applied by a senior official from NLC so that the NPO can get more funding. And athletic tracks, change room renovation, soccer field, grass, stadium, and grandstanding painting were only done after NLC approved further funding amounting to 4.2 million. And there is no value for the money. You can see that initially the grant was given, nothing was done. Then the official applied for further funding. And as a result, the further funding was the only one which was used to do the renovation as it was initially applied for. Then flow of money from bank accounts. A company used the money to purchase properties, and a company transferred 2.5 million to the conveyancer attorney of the former board member, and 2.2 was transferred to financial service for the payments of a loan. Other amounts were transferred to other accounts and used for personal benefits. They used it for purchasing and repairing of vehicle. The vehicle include Honda Jazz, Mercedes-Benz E63, Mercedes-Benz SLK AMG E63, and Audi A3. That's the money that was approved. It was not used for the purpose that was intended for. And when we deal with NPO2, in 2016, the NPO2 submitted the application for grant funding for HIV program to the value of 700,000. And the application was unsuccessful. In late November 2016, an amount of 15 million was paid into the NPO's bank account. The NPO was hijacked and signatory to the bank account was changed to 3 known individuals. Finding is as follows. The known individual hijacked the identity of the NPO2 and submitted an application to NLC dated 9 September 2016 requesting funding for the construction of a drug rehabilitation center in Gauteng. The application was approved and NLC awarded a total of 27 million grant funding to the NPO2. Few buildings blocks were constructed in an existing drug rehab in Gauteng. The newly constructed structure are in poor quality and there's no value to show that 27 million was really used for the purpose it was intended for. And when we analyze the flow of the 27 million, as mentioned above, NPO was awarded 27.5 million of the amount paid to the NPO. To 10 million was paid to one known individual's personal account. 3.1 was paid to the same individual's law firm. 3.5 was paid to a company owed by the brother to one of the senior officials of NLC. That's how the money was distributed, the 27 billion. An NPO2 bank account statement revealed that 2 amounts of 267,000 and 271,000 were used for the purchase of 2 food outlet franchises owned by one known individual. The bank statement further revealed that 5 million was transferred to one attorney for the purchase of 11 million farm. And it has been determined that 200,000 was paid from the NPO2 bank account for the purchase of a vehicle. And when dealing with NPO8, NPO8 submitted application for grant funding to NLC on 11 February 2016 for 49 million. The purpose of the request was to assist another NPC for the project of drilling 200 boreholes in Limpopo, Mpumalanga, Northwest, Free State, and Eastern Cape. And on 19 February 2016, NLC approved NPO 8 grant funding to the value of 55.4 million. And on 22nd February 2016, NPO 8 and other NPC signed a memorandum of understanding that the grant will be transferred to another NPC within 2 working days upon receipt thereof. And on 24 February 2016, NPO 8 transferred the grant funding of 55.2 million to the bank account of another NPC as per the signed agreement. Financial investigation shows that upon the transfer of that 55 million, a total of 10 million was transferred to one entity for services which were not or never rendered, and 599,000 was used to purchase a new vehicle. An amount of 158,000 was also used to purchase another new vehicle, and 2.6 was used to purchase a property. 1 million was transferred to the call account of the known entity, and 2.2 million was transferred to another known entity. 341,000 was used to purchase a second-hand vehicle. And 200 value for money, 200 borehole in 5 different provinces were drilled and equipped by 2 private companies. One entity received 10 million for doing no work. Now dealing with NPO 9. NPO 9 was registered with the Department of Social Development on 24 May 2012, and on 7 December 2017, one known individual submitted the application for grant funding to NLC on behalf of the NPO 9. The purpose of the application was for the construction of integrated sports facility in Limpopo. NPO 9 was granted a grant funding of 15 million. The financial analysis of the NPO 9 is as follows. The financial analysis conducted on the NPO bank account has revealed that a total of 695,000 was transferred from the NPO 9's bank account to one known individual's personal bank account, and 6.6 was transferred to his business account. The remaining amount was transferred to unknown accounts that the SIU is still pursuing. Value for money, NPO 9 only changed 13 doors and painted the grandstand of an existing stadium. No value for money was received for this grant. Now dealing with NPC 2. NPC 2 submitted an application on 7 June 2016 for grant funding to the amount of 50 million by the founding member of the NPC. The NPC did not receive a response from NLC. One known individual submitted the documentation to NLC of change of the NPC ownership and also changed the bank details of the NPC 2. The NLC adjudicated the initial application submitted on 7 June 2016. And it should be noted that the initial application was adjudicated beyond the 150 days prescribed by the NLC Act. NPC 2 received a grant funding of 10.1 million on 24 May 2017 from NLC. This is just an indication how some of the NLC were hijacked, where the owner applied and he never received any correspondence. As a result, a new application was submitted without the knowledge of the initial NPC owner. And findings, the purpose of the application submitted by NPC to NPC 2 to NLC was to host South African Youth Awards. And in the final report to NLC by the NPC 2 indicated that the events took place as planned, and invoices were also submitted to the said event. And according to one government entity, NPO 2 has never funded, sponsored, or went into joint venture for hosting of any award, whereas they submitted the report to indicate that they managed to host the award as the application was. And when we look at the financial analysis of the NPC2, financial analysis of the NPC2 bank account shows that money was transferred to company either owned by the known individual or his close friends. 3.2 was transferred to one entity linked to the known individual. 1.7 was transferred to an investment entity of that individual, and 1 million was transferred to the trust account owned by senior official of NLC and his family. So that's how the money was spent. Remember, they submitted the reports to NLC that the events took place and they managed to sponsor the award. And still a financial analysis of NPC2, we can see that 2.1 million went to another known entity, 1 million was transferred to another known entity, and 151,000 went to another known entity. 1.5 million was transferred to the senior official of NLC family's company, and 500,000 went to the company of wife of the senior official of NLC. Now dealing with NPO 11. NPO 11 was hijacked by non-individual. In terms of the application submitted to NLC by the hijackers were to build a cricket sports development and training for the disadvantaged community in Northern Cape. The grant funding of 5.5 million was awarded to the NPO by NLC. The entire amount was not used for its intended purpose. And the financial analysis of the NPO 11 is as follows. 1.7 million and 500,000 were transferred to two entities owned by one of the known NPO hijacker, and 1.1 million was transferred to one of the NPO hijacker key role player and close ally to the senior official of NLC. The entire amount was ultimately transferred to the entity linked to the family of the senior official of NLC. The entire grant was embezzled and no work was done. NPO 5 was also hijacked by one known hijacking key individual. They submitted a fraudulent application to NLC in their name using the NPO 5 profile to build an old-age home in Northwest Province. They then opened a new bank account for the NPO. NPO was granted 23 million grant funding by NLC on 27 September 2017. And on 16 October 2017, NLC made a payment of 20 million to the NPO's bank account. And financial analysis of the NPO 5 between 17 and 27 October 2017, an amount of totaling 11.7 million was transferred from NPO's bank account to the business bank account of private company 2. Between 19 and 27 October 2017, the owner of the private company 2, refer above, transfer an amount totaling 9.2 million to a bank account of a conveyancing attorney for the purchase of the 27 million immovable property to the benefit of former NLC board member 2. Remember, we spoke about the purchase of a property initially of the former board member. So money still were transferred to the conveyancing attorney. Then the attorney will use the money in order for the bond that was taken for the purchase of that immovable property. The old age home construction that was started remained unfinished to this day, whereas more than 20 million was transferred to this NPO. Now dealing with NPO 7, an application for grant was submitted on behalf of the legitimate NPO members by known individual. The application was for the construction of an old age home in Limpopo. The known individual changed the banking account of the NPO 7 without the knowledge of the legitimate member of the NPO7. The application was subsequently approved and 20 million was granted by NPO to NPO7 by NLC. The legitimate member of NPO7 became aware that NLC paid grant funding to the value of 22.5 million to the NPO, that is NPO7. They then approached NLC to alert them that they paid money to the hijackers of NPO7. NLC arranged a meeting with the legitimate member of NPO7 and the hijackers to try and resolve the issue amicably. Instead of opening a criminal case against the hijackers and recover the money, NLC opted to grant further funding of 7.8 million to the legitimate members so that they can finalize the work that the initial application was meant for. And out of the 22.5 million paid to the hijackers, 4 million was transferred to conveyancing attorney for the purchase of the 27 million immovable property by the former NLC board member. The remainder of 22 million lot was transferred to a company owned by one of the hijackers. The funds were laundered from his company to another company linked to himself and those of the family of one senior official of NLC. Construction of the old age home was started by the legitimate member of NPO7 after they were awarded over 7 million grant by NLC, but the project was abandoned a few years back. Now dealing with NPO 13, NLC initiated a project that is proactive funding project to build a museum and a library in Northern Cape Province. NPO 13 received 20.1 million in two tranches, that is 10 million and 10.1 million paid in two different bank accounts of NPO 13. The construction work was awarded to NPO 13. The construction work awarded to NPO 13 was awarded to a company owned by a cousin of one of the senior officials of NLC. And company appointed for the construction of the museum, these are the companies which were appointed. The construction company, as indicated, was owned by a cousin of the senior official of NLC. Engineering company was owned by the brother of one senior official of NLC. Company B was owned by the wife of the senior official of NLC. The biggest chunk of the grant went to the above-mentioned company. Gratification, NPO 13 paid an amount of 1.5 million to a construction company which was responsible for the building of a house for one senior official of NLC. Value for money, the project was completed, but building structure does not correlate with the money paid to the NPO 13 by NLC. SIU is in the process of acquiring service of a quantity surveyor to determine the value for money in that property. And now when we deal with NPO 1, NPO 1 was formed in Limpopo in 1999. The founding member of NPO 1 applied for grant funding and it was not approved. A fraudulent application was submitted to NLC on behalf of NPO 1 on 11 September 2017 by hijackers. And on 23 October 2017, NLC approved the application and grant funding of 27 million was awarded to the hijackers of NPO 1. The purpose for the grant was to build an old age home in Mpumalanga. A financial analysis of the NPO 1 is that in October 28, 2017, NPO 1 transferred an amount of 5 million to an attorney for the purchase of a property owned by the former NLC board member 1. Monies that came from NPO 1 and other NPOs went to different companies and was ultimately transferred to the bond account of the former NLC board member 1. Almost 5.4 million was paid from different companies that received money from different NPO, including NPO 1. Construction of the old age home in Mpumalanga commenced but remained unfinished to this day, even though it started in 2017. And NPO 14 background, NPO 14 submitted application for grant funding to NLC in 2015, and it was not successful. NPO 14 was hijacked by several members known to SIU, and they submitted an application for grant funding to the NLC on 5 September 2017 for the construction of an old-age home in Northern Cape Province. NLC granted NPO a grant total of 27 million. And out of the grant which was awarded, the company which is appointed in order to do the construction of the old age home are as follows. Construction company was the company that was owned by a cousin of one senior official of NLC, and the engineering company was owned by the brother of the NLC senior official, and a company B, which was used for the construction of old age, was owned by the wife of the senior official of NLC, and the biggest chunk also of this money went to the NLC, from NLC went to the above mentioned company. And in terms of value for money, hijackers abandoned the project at the inception stage. They vanished with all the 20 million paid by NLC. Project restarted only after further funding by NLC was granted. Despite this, project still remain unfinished till this day. And financial analysis of NPO 14, it shows that the investigation revealed that 1.5 million was transferred from NPO 14 to private farming businesses, and 3.8 was transferred from NPO 14 to a private company 2. NPO 14 also transferred 15 million to NPO 15. And NPO 11 applied for grant funding to develop a boxing arena in the Eastern Cape. The initial application reflects that NPO 11 applied for 24 million funding, but was granted a total of 31 million by NLC. The application form reflects the name of the NPO 11 member who indicated that to the SIU that they don't own NPO 11. Whereas in the application form, they are reflected as the applicant and the owner of the NPO 11. And the financial analysis of the NPO 11 shows as follows. NPO 11 received 31 million from NLC, 7.8 was transferred to one known engineering company, 3 million was transferred to a consulting company owned by one member of a private company 12, 6.1 million was paid to NPO 11 call account. Financial investigation analysis of private company 2 that we just mentioned. Private company 2 received 12.5 million from NPO 11 and other different hijack NPO. After receiving the fund, the money was distributed as follows. A company linked to the brother of NLC senior official received 5.9 million. Trust account opened by one NLC senior official received 3 million. Farming company owned by the NLC senior official family received 800,000. Company owned by one NLC senior official received 230,000 and contribution to the restaurant owned by the wife of one NLC senior official, 500,000. Private company 1 owned by one of the key role player received 6.5 from private company 2 that received money from different NPO. Appointment of quantity surveyor. The SIU is in the process of acquiring the service of quantity surveyor as indicated, and an engineer to conduct a value for money exercise in the unfinished building constructed by the NPO for the purpose of recovery through civil litigation. And when dealing with civil litigation, the SIU has commenced with civil litigation proceeding to preserve illegally gained properties and set aside grant awarded to above-mentioned NPOs. The SIU has started with the preservation of property acquired by members of Inqaba Yokulinda NPO. The next slide will outline what we have preserved. And SIU is currently in the process of appointing senior counsel to institute civil proceeding in the special tribunal to recover stolen money from NPO and NPCE mentioned in the presentation. With regard to the preservation order granted in favor of SIU in respect of the Inqaba Yokulinda NPO, ERF 1618 Swarkop Extension 8 Township belonging to Mr. Chifiwa Terence Magogodela, a vehicle belonging to Mr. Jabusi Bande, those are the vehicles which were freeze, and vehicle owned by Bitumelo Audi A3 was also freeze. On the main application, the SIU seek to set aside the award of the grant to Inqaba Yokulinda by NLC to an amount of 19.2 million. The SIU will also request the court to order Buyisiwe Khoza, the CEO of the NPA, to pay back the 5 million which was used for her personal gain, other than what was intended for in terms of the grant agreement with the NLC. With regard to the NPA referral, evidence which points to the commission of offense in referred to NPA for further investigation and prosecution. 10 identified criminal referral against NLC official, NPO, and NPOCs will be finalized and referred to the National Prosecuting on or before 31 March 2022. In terms of disciplinary referral, a disciplinary recommendation letter dated 13 August 2021 was submitted to the Minister of Trade and Industry for former NLC board member 1. The member tenders his resignation immediately after he was requested by the Honorable Minister of Trade and Industry to furnish him with reason why he should not be fired as a result of the finding or recommendation of the SIU. And the SIU also submitted a disciplinary recommendation letter to NLC dated 27 August 2021 against senior official of NLC. Disciplinary hearing was conducted from 17 January 2022, and the SIU received the outcome of the disciplinary process. The SIU is still studying the outcome of the disciplinary hearing and will chart the way forward thereafter. And there are some reservations with regard to the way the disciplinary hearing was conducted. Further disciplinary recommendation will be referred to NLC as and when the evidence become available. And with regard to the investigation, as advocate indicated, SIU is in the process of finalizing 12 investigations that form part of phase 1. Allegation of the said investigation which were received in the latter part of 2021 will be finalized around 30th of June 2022. Phase 2 of the investigation is currently we have received 22 new allegations. The investigation of the new allegation will commence from the 1st of March, which started yesterday, until November 2022. In total, the SIU will investigate approximately 50 allegations relating to irregular allocation of funds by the NLC to unqualified beneficiary. The SIU will further investigate maladministration in relation to the investment of funds in the National Lottery Distribution Trust Funds, contrary to the provision of the Lottery Act. And from here, I will hand over back to Advocate Mutibi so that he can finalize with regard to the observation. Advocate, over to you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Lekgetho. I really appreciate that presentation. Honorable Chair, honorable members, as the Honorable Committee can really observe, we have, in our investigation, uncovered a web of corrupt networks. And this involves detailed investigation, detailed analysis, and we have, as part of our observations, we have observed the utilization of the modus operandi, the method of operation used to siphon money from NLC through various NPOs and NPCs, and of course involving other vehicles, whether it's legal firms or any other related vehicles. So that part we have uncovered with stringent investigative methods, analyzing the flow of funds, and we now, as my colleague has indicated, have gathered evidence, and it's now the time to conclude and refer further actions for further outcomes for actioning. We have also observed that there is a high measure of collusion between the NLC officials and the NPOs and NPCs. And of course, we will detail this in the report that we will prepare. Sorry, Chair, there's a cross line.
Can we ask everyone on the platform to mute, please, besides the speaker?
Thank you, Chair. We have also observed a collusion between some board members and NPOs and NPCs. And as we say, we will unpack and particularize the nature of the collusion for purposes of action to be taken. I need to just assure the Honorable Committee that even in instances where either it's board members or officials who resign, the resignation, while in its nature,
Advocate, I think you're frozen.
No, Chair, there's people that keep unmuting themselves and interrupting the advocate.
Can we ask the Secretariat to remove the people from the platform who was disrupting the meeting?
We'll do.
Can we ask the advocate to conclude, please? You were talking about NLC officials who resign from the NLC. Advocate, have we lost the advocate?
Sorry, Chair.
Yes.
This is Kaiser Khanyago. We just had a load shedding or something, but our generator is recovering. I think he will come back.
Okay. Can you, Mr. Khanyago, can you conclude? Or would you prefer that we wait for the advocate to reconnect?
Yes, I would prefer that. Thanks.
Can we then just ask the Secretariat to indicate to us when the advocate is back on the platform? I think, can we just take a comfort break of a minute or two while we wait for him to rejoin?
Thanks, Chair.
Committee Secretary, can we just check with Advocate Motibi?
Chair, I'm in the process. I'm in process of checking with his office, Chair. So if you just give me a. Chair, Advocate is on the platform, Chair. He's connecting to his audio.
Thank you very much for reconnecting, Advocate Motibi. You froze at the point where you were briefing us on members of the NLC who have resigned. If you can just pick up from that point. Thank you. Please unmute. You are muted. Can you start afresh? Yeah.
Yes. I was just saying apologies for the reconnection. I'm not sure whether this is load shedding or any other technical problems, but these technicians are looking at it. Sorry about that. We really apologize. Chair, just to pick up where I ended, as I was saying, the resignation, while in its nature, terminates the employer-employee relations if it's the official, and if it's the board member, it terminates their membership on the board, and of course, consequently, no disciplinary action can be taken. But from a civil recovery perspective, we are still able to take civil action to recover from these people, whether they've resigned or not. From a criminal prosecution or criminal process perspective, we will also ensure that they are followed on. So, Chair, we've also observed, Mr. Lekgetho, please, if you can just reflect the presentation. We have also observed the abuse of NPOs and NPCs through generally what's called, hijacking, or just deliberately abusing these vehicles for purposes of siphoning money and embezzling the money from the NLCs. And we will we've identified that, we will particularize it in the report. Review of proactive funding particular this proactive funding process should be reviewed. There is a measure abuse related to proactive funding process.
I think the advocate is still having connectivity problems. It seems like it because he has frozen again. Advocate.
Chair, I'm contacting the office to see what's going on, Chair.
Okay. And we've gone so well up until this point. Let's just have a little bit of patience.
Chairperson, they are looking at the matter. It appears there is load shedding happening at the moment. So they're trying to reconnect as soon as they can, Chair.
Can we check whether anybody on the team can conclude, and then we can go into a question session with the members while we sort out the connectivity problems of advocates?
The presenter of the presentation, Mr. Leonard, also is off the platform at the moment, Chair. So I'll check with the office again if anyone else can conclude the matter, Chair.
Thank you.
Chairperson.
Honourable Cuthbert.
You did say at the beginning of the meeting that there was a scheduled break. Should we not take that scheduled break now? It seems as if, and I don't want to preempt the SIU's work, but they have, got to close to the end of their presentation. Should we not take a break now, allow them to get their devices connected properly, and then we can come back, they can quickly wrap up and we can ask the questions?
Yes, that's a very good idea. I will take that recommendation from Honourable Cuthbert. So we'll have a 15-minute break now, and we'll ask the committee secretariat to work with the SIU so that in 15 minutes, let's say at 11:15, we come back and we resume with everyone on the platform. Thank you very much. We will break now, committee secretary.
I will inform the SIU Chair and that we'll break for 50 minutes.
helpful in the process. So all we need to really continue to do is to continue to find all these irregularities, all the corruption, follow the money, freeze the assets, and make sure that the other processes, where there's criminality, actions are taken, where there's irregularities, officials are disciplined, and other regulatory authorities also take action. Chair, I want to pause here and thank you very much for the opportunity for us to present. That is the end of our presentation.
Thank you very much, Advocate, and your team for taking the time out of your busy schedules to come and update us. On the 7th of December, we agreed as this portfolio committee that we would request you to come and brief the committee on an update and give us an update on your investigations, and you have done so. So given the gross corruption, the gross level of corruption and maladministration at NLC, the minister is not part of the portfolio committee, and you were requested to come to the portfolio committee. So we will, as soon as we receive the completed report, phase 1 in March, and you said that report will be with the president in April, that we call the minister and his department to come and account to the portfolio committee on action that the department has taken, because we can see in the period under investigation, there has been widespread corruption. So let me hand over to the portfolio committee. I see 2 hands. I see Honourable Cuthbert, and then I see Honourable McPherson and Mohatse and Yako. So that's the first round. Let us proceed. Honourable Cuthbert.
Thank you very much, Honourable Chairperson. Honourable Chair, I'd like to start off by thanking the SIU for their sterling work. I think they really are one of the few crime-fighting agencies that does their job with pride, and you can see it in their presentation, as well as the immense effort they went into putting all the detail together for this particular presentation. So thank you to them, and thank you for the good work that they do. However, I must say it's disappointing that both the Minister and the NLC's leadership have not chosen to attend this meeting. It just reinforces the point that they are and never were serious about fighting corruption at the NLC. Chair, the only reason we sit here today is because of the hard work of investigative journalists and the opposition for consistently exposing corruption at the organisation and applying pressure on government to act. I really wonder what it's like to be an ANC member today and to see how money meant for drug rehabilitation centres, old age homes, and women and youth empowerment has been used for luxury cars and homes. Chair, this is all whilst the ANC sat and smeared journalists, tried to silence the opposition, and make sure that we did not uncover the rot. I think that it's really a day of reckoning for these members, and I sincerely hope that their consciences are speaking to them today, and the fact that they decided to cover this up for as many years as they did. Chair, in saying that, there's some questions that I would like to pose to the SIU, if they would kindly answer them. The first one is, what is the total value of funds that have allegedly been misappropriated, stolen during the first phase of this investigation? So the total amount for the 12 investigations you've spoken to about us today. And then, has there anything that has been handed over to the Hawks or to the NPA thus far? I understand that there was, sorry, there's something in the background there. My apologies. I just want to find out if there's anything that has been handed over to the Hawks or to the NPA, aside from the preservation order that was instituted a couple of weeks ago. And then I would like to also find out what the role of the remaining NLC senior officials and board members has been in assisting with the investigation. And also, have they been helpful or obstructive in that regard? And then I would also like to understand, considering the fact that NLC has received clean audits by default over a number of years from the Auditor General, despite the industrial looting taking place. What recommendations would you have for them to strengthen financial controls and obviously eliminate corruption at the end of the day? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Cuthbert. Honourable McPherson.
Thanks, Chair. And really it is, I think, the culmination of a very long journey and a very long road that many people have walked on this issue. And I really want to echo the sentiments of Honourable Cuthbert that really we would not be in the position that we are today if it wasn't for the very brave work that many journalists did in exposing the rot. And I think that we must particularly make mention of a gentleman by the name of Mr. Raymond Joseph, who at many times put his own life on the line to expose the rot that we see today. And I think that we owe him a great deal of gratitude for ventilating many of these issues in the public domain, despite the disgusting attacks that he came under by the National Lotteries Commission, despite the disgusting attacks that he was subjected to by members of this committee and accusations that he was subjected to. And I think that all those that have played a big role in exposing this corruption should definitely be honoured. But this sort of corruption, Chair, does not take place in isolation. It cannot take place in its own, and it cannot take place without being aided and abetted. And regrettably, this committee and members of this committee and previous ministers have allowed what we see today to take place over a 7-year period. And that's how long it's actually been. People have stood by and watched and refused to act. It started in 2015, Chair, when the then former Minister, Rob Davies, enacted and enabled proactive funding. And that is the root cause and the root vehicle that all of this corruption has taken place. And I warned then, and I made a written submission to him on it, that this would lead to corruption, it would lead to a lack of transparency, and it would end in disaster. And it was completely ignored and rebuffed, and we now see the result of that. In 2017, the then committee, the Trade and Industry Committee of the Fifth Parliament, I specifically, once these allegations started coming out, and once Mr. Joseph's reports had started to come into the public domain, said that we should call the leadership of the NLC to the committee and specifically speak to what was then the first instance of corruption revolving Denze. The ANC members of the committee voted against that. I then brought to the committee that the committee itself should investigate the allegations into corruption. Again, the ANC members of the committee voted against that. ANC members of this committee did not want the public release of beneficiaries. They stalled. They aided and abetted at every step of the way those that are now corrupt within the NLC. And really, while we can talk about better financial controls and better procedures within the NLC, we really have to ask ourselves, what oversight role did this committee play? And how did it enable so much money to be looted and stolen from the NLC at the expense of mostly poor black people, the very constituents that members of this committee claim to represent? And quite frankly, I think that this committee should do some soul searching and reflect on how we got to this position. Because if this committee does not want to change its ways, and if members of the governing party want to continue to protect what is so blatantly wrong and illegal, well, then we're just going to get back to the same position, and it will be another entity, and it will be other members of those entities that will be doing exactly the same. And I hope, and my real request of the SIU and law enforcement agencies is at the end of the day that people see the inside of jail cells because that's actually what matters. Because there are people that are implicated in this, that members of this committee fought for to be the chair of the NLC. They wanted to extend contracts. They wanted to allow them to stay on, to allow that corruption to take place. And it was only the opposition and members of the opposition in this committee that fought against that. And sadly, we lost those battles. But again, it was the governing party at the forefront of allowing all of this to take place. So, Chair, I really do want to thank you personally for allowing this issue to come to the forefront now, for allowing the committee to discuss this. But quite frankly, members before you really need to be held accountable as well, as much as we want to hold those in the NLC accountable. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable McPherson. Honourable Yaku. Sorry, first Honourable Moatse and then Honourable Yaku. Honourable Moatse.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Let me start by apologizing for the poor network. I can't be able to open the video. And then, Chairperson, let me welcome the report from the SIU and thank the SIU for the comprehensive interim report and wish the SIU every success, a very successful, that every bit of wrongdoings is fully exposed and every cent of public money is fully accounted for or recovered. Chairperson, as the ANC-led government, one of our core mandate is to fight corruption. I have two clarity-seeking questions, Chairperson. Has the SIU, in its investigations, found any wrongdoings on the side of the attorneys who received the vast amount of money in that trust account? If so, have the said attorneys been reported to the Legal Practice Council? If not, why? Secondly, Chairperson, if would it be correct to say, had it not been for the support received from the minister and his efforts, your work would have been much difficult to start and reach the advanced stage they are at now? Chairperson, as the ANC-led government, we urge the law to take action on that criminals. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Honourable Yaku.
Thank you very much, Chair. I hope you can hear me. The network here is not that great.
No, that's great. We can hear you very well and see you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Chair. And I want to also thank the SIU for this report. It is quite interesting report. It's quite jarring. It's not a pleasant sight. Honestly, it's just shocking how much money can just be taken unceremoniously without trail from people who are actually supposed to be serving the community. Because here we've got the building of an old age home, rehabilitation center, athletics tracks, boreholes, youth awards, museum and library, like all things that society really needs. And those are all incredible ideas. And if only they were executed in the right way, we'd be so much further right now than we are. So for me personally, it's triggering how insane the amounts are that have been just looted and taken with no accountability whatsoever. The advocate alluded to the fact that, which is I think a very important key, because all along NLC has been audited. So which company was auditing the NLC? during the years I'm covering this investigation. And what is the SIU doing about that particular auditing company? Because I really am starting to believe that they were quite complicit in the outcomes and in the blatantness and the daring nature in which they took this money. And also, I must say that, you know, Minister Patel has not taken this committee very seriously since last year. In fact, the year before, we're complaining about his inavailability and how he's never coming to committee meetings, how he always has an excuse not to come to meetings. And I don't think he knows who he really accounts to, because we come from constituencies where we need to report on what is happening. And he does not take us seriously because we're part of his reporting structure, and he's not doing that. And I think, Chair, we need to, as a committee, write to him to say we are not happy with the way in which he has conducted himself in terms of being present in our meetings, and also not just being present, but accounting in a way that respects us, in a way that is honest to us, because it doesn't seem like he does that. He seems to oscillate a lot between languages, and he has many words that he speaks, but they don't really make sense in terms of the honesty and the truth of what is actually happening in his department. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honourable Yaku. Honourable Malameja. Honourable.
Thank you, Chair. Chairperson, honourable members, SIU team led by Advocate Mutibi. Let me take this opportunity, Comrade Chair, and make it clear and be known that it is very easy to speak and very easy to point out forgetting the responsibility of who you are. It is not easy to govern, because when you govern everybody. And when you govern everybody, you think everybody understands and has got the interests of the country at heart. Now you've got people that you thought they will be doing the right things, only to find out they've ganked themselves to do the wrong things. I'm saying this, comrade, because had it not been the government of the day, ANC-led government, who was so proactive to ensure that they alert the relevant authority to uncover this kind of syndicates, mainly by the people that were trusted to ensure that they take the monies that are intended to the communities to improve the life and the living conditions of our masses and ensure that they are taken to the book. We really need to applaud the ANC. As the ANC, we talk, we act. All this was the contribution of the former PC committee chairperson, Comrade Duma, who, when he realized this through his committee, he never sat down and said, no, I'll wait. He acted. The minister who today is not here, whom we understand why is not here, also continued that. The SIU cannot just come here if there were no deals that been initiated by the ANC. However, to the chairperson, appreciating the good work done by the SIU, I've got just few questions that I just want to be clarified. Advocate Mutibi and the team. Has the investigation revealed no wrongdoing on the side of the junior officials who received, assessed, and approved applications by the NPOs? You see, Chairperson, the rod cannot only be located amongst the senior officials. It is much deeper than at the top, comrade. We must be mindful of that, comrade. The other one, comrade, will be, in the analysis of the investigation team, how was the Financial Intelligence Center not able to flag some of these suspicious transfers of monies? Comrade Chairperson, why do we only hear about the movement of money when there are whistleblowers who come out with information? When we have institutions like the Financial Intelligence Center, which will be able to pick any suspicious transaction of money laundering and swiftly bring it to the attention of the authorities. I'm saying that, Comrade Chairperson, so that we get clarity. But all in all, Comrade, we welcome the report, and bearing in mind this report is not yet completed. And it is common knowledge and commendable that we normally deal with the end product before we point out to other people who are doing everything to ensure that we bring corruption down. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Malamaja. Honorable Mulder.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Previous speakers has actually said a lot. I just want to expand elaborate on the following. You know, we have been confronted with so many rhetoric in these committees and in Parliament. One of the examples is if you look at the website of the National Lottery Board, it says people use this funding to do extraordinary things, taking the lead to improve their lives and communities. Every time you buy a National Lottery ticket, you will help make this happen. Now, let me congratulate Advocate Andy Latibi on a well presented investigation and report. I think the content says it all. And the point that I actually want to make is this: there are consequences. The two types of consequences to the corruption that's gone this far. The one set, of course, is it threatens sustainable economic development. It threatens ethical values in South Africa. It threatens justice. It destabilizes our society and it endangers the rule of law. It also undermines the institutions and values of our democracy. These are some of the rhetoric words that you find in lots of reports and in speeches in Parliament, etc. This occurrence actually threatens this all. That's one set of consequences. The second set of consequences is a consequence that should happen that we seldom see. The executive should be held accountable, Chair, for letting this situation deteriorate as far as it did. There should be consequences. People should be prosecuted, and then they should, and in this way, trust should be then reinstated in the lottery. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Mulder. Honorable Burns Ngamashi. And then the last person will be Honorable Mbiani before we hand over to the SIU. Honorable Burns Ngamashi.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. And honorable members of the committee. And I must also, Chair, join members in welcoming this draft report of the SIU. And in welcoming the draft report of the SIU, Chairperson, I think there are certain distortions and misconceptions that we must correct. Yes, Chair, let us accept that we may have members of this committee who are so fixated with the hysterical obsession about the ANC being associated with corruption. And what probably some of these members forget is the fact that it is the ANC government, the ANC president, who has signed off the proclamation that has enabled the investigation, precisely because it is part of what the ANC government seek to restore, to ensure that in all government institutions where there are traces of corruption, such must be dealt with within our legal instruments. So to attribute this to anything other than the legitimate processes that have been supported by the president, by the minister, and of course, the support that would have been given to the SIU. That should be very clear, Chair, that the ANC is committed to uprooting any form of corruption. And secondly, Chair, the chairperson of this committee is a member of the African National Congress. And I would appeal to some of the members in this committee to disabuse their mind of this institutionalized paternalistic posturing, seeking to patronize the chairperson, employing old age tactic of divide and rule. It is the ANC that has consciously taken this decision to ensure that no stone must be left unturned when it comes to corruption. So I want to assure everybody in South Africa that the ANC is steadfast in ensuring that corruption will be rooted out of its institutional systems. Whoever may have joined the ANC for purposes of easy access to resources, that has come to a stop. And Chair, as the governing party, we work within a constitutional jurisprudence that has established doctrines, principles, and presumptions. We have to follow all those processes so as to ensure that at the end of the day, when everything else is brought before the courts of law, it will pass the judicial master.
Can you switch off your video? You're breaking up a bit.
Thank you very much. It will pass the constitutional master. So what, Chair, we want to check, because remember, this is the draft report. Of course, there are clear indicators and or indications, and some work has been done. But there are certain things that I just want to check just for clarity from the SIU component. The first being that, what has the SIU adopted in the interim to prevent members of the other NPOs to dispose of assets they purchased with the stolen money? We would be interested in knowing what has been done as yet. And the last question, which is the second one, what remedial action is being taken against the directors of the construction and engineering companies that consciously participated in this criminal syndicate? Because there are bodies that govern the functionality of directors and bodies, professional bodies that deal with some of these professional practitioners. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honourable Burns Nxamashe. Honourable Mbuyani.
Chairperson, thank you very much. Can I request that my video is not switched on? I'm a Rotarian, Chairperson, where I'm staying. I can't be able to broadband correctly. But Chairperson, let me first welcome the report from the SIU. It's a comprehensive interim report. Now wish the SIU every success in complementing the remainder of its investigation, so that every bit of wrongdoing is fully exposed and every cent of the public money is accounted for. Chairperson, the report, it paints a picture of an organized systematic crime syndicate at work, and I welcome the step that the SIU will take on referring criminals charges to relevant authority. The extent of the alleged wrongdoing points to the important step that the ANC-led government has taken to investigate corruption and wrongdoing. In fact, you can point at many actions by the ANC-led government. We can point to the request by the previous minister to the NLC board to undertake a forensic investigation. When the new administration took in 2019, the new minister immediately put NLC in terms of the account to forensic. So, Chairperson, when the NLC sought to challenge the powers, we were able to deal with that. Let me just pose one question here, Chairperson, from the NLC, the SIU. In terms of, because we have seen now there are some Twitter being round off of the minister that is not part of the meeting. The minister has apologized, and this report is for the SIU to bring to the committee, not the department. And we further alluded to that to say the minister will come and account as per the department, because this is the entity of the government. We further allowed the minister to come and approach, and he has agreed to come and then to the committee. Chairperson, my question will be in terms of the process moving forward. Whether do you see any process moving forward in terms of the report by the 29 August 2022, or they said it's November. So we would like to appreciate, and also I think that by that time the report will be conclusive, and we will further do note that the portfolio committee received this comprehensive report at that time. Chairperson, in terms of the proclamation 32 of 2020 by the President of the Republic of South Africa and the President of the ANC to investigate, amongst others, the lottery allegation of the corrupt and fraud at NLC, how many cases have you currently investigated? And how long do you think it will take? Or the timeline for November is the timeline that has been concluded? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Mbuyane. Honorable Mutawu.
Thanks, Chair, for the opportunity. Chair, let me join members to welcome the report and applaud the work done by SIU. We hope that this report will not gather dust and bring to book those who are responsible. I have only 2 questions, Chair. What action has been taken to locate and hold people involved accountable? And then my second question will be, has the investigation been able to identify the people who use NPOs and how are they connected with the NLC officials? Lastly, Chair, the ANC is committed to clean corruption in our government. We support the report of SIU. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Mutawu. Advocate Motibi, I hand back to you for responses to you and your team.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair and honorable members, for the questions raised and comments made. We are encouraged by the welcoming of the presentation, but of course we would like to make sure that we conclude the investigations within the timelines indicated, so that ultimately the actions can be taken against those who are responsible. I'll start off with Honorable Cuthbert's questions. What is the total value amount in phase 1? The team has reported that in phase 1, to date, they have quantified the amount to be about 300 million, but they are still going on to quantify, as there are still 12 further NPOs that still needs to be investigated, so the amount may escalate. To date, we have not as yet handed over the referrals to the Hawks and the NPA. As we have identified in the presentation, we will be referring those to the NPA by the 31st of March, and those would include individuals, entities, any professionals that may be involved. The role of the other officials, to date, we have identified the officials that have been involved, and at all levels and at all areas of the processes of NLC, and those that have played the role from outside of the NLC. So we are busy finalizing those, and we will ensure that evidence is presented to all the relevant authorities that require to take action. Recommendations to improve financial controls. Indeed, when I dealt with the slide that deals with the outcomes and consequence management, as part of the systemic improvements, part of what we look at is what the investigations may have revealed relating to people failure, process failure, systems failure, and all of this could be in various functionalities, whether it's finance or risk management, legal, or business processes themselves. And we then ensure that we identify those. Our accountants, forensic accountants that are on board would probably have identified in detail the kind of financial processes that have failed, and we are able then to look at the controls that may be required to improve the environment or even the processes themselves. Honorable McPherson, thank you for the questions. The request for SIU to arrest people and make sure that they go to jail, we take that into account as part of the investigations. Already, as we have indicated, that we'll refer the evidence pointing to criminal action to NPA. It does mean that from our side, we have pointed out that evidence and also who it relates to in terms of those who needs to be further acted upon when we refer this to NPA and to Hawks. And we remain part of that process and assist that process so that it's handled appropriately and speedily. Honorable Moatse, the question relating to, has the SIU found wrongdoing on the part of the attorneys, the use of trust accounts, and whether they are going to be referred to LPC? Indeed, as I indicated when I dealt with the slides on consequence management, on the extreme right of that slide, there's reference to other regulatory authorities and other professional bodies. So, and I think another honorable member asked later on around whether we're going to refer, other professionals to other bodies. Yes, we are going to. We've identified irregular movements of funds through the trust accounts, and we will ensure that all those identified firms of attorneys are referred to the LPC based on the evidence that we have obtained. How money can be spent without trace? Honorable Moatse, I can really assure you that as you might have noticed on the presentation, our investigators and the accountants, forensic, cyber, they've all spent time in analyzing the bank accounts and the movement of funds. And we do that in particular to make sure that we follow the flow of money and trace these funds where they have ended. That is going to assist us with the recovery process from everyone who is involved in this criminal chain. So we will make sure that we continue on that. The issue around the audit, indeed, the investigations revealed that there was a company, or there is a company that conducted the audits. So it is the investigators' duty at the moment, in conjunction with NLC, just to go and pick up and find the processes that this company did. Because if they have not done their proper function in terms of auditing this project, then we will ensure without hesitation that they are also taken to account. So we will do that, Honorable Moatse, and then we will spell it out in the report that's coming. Honorable Malemeja, I want to pick up on the question and really agree that this investigation has, over and above the observations we've made, it has indeed exposed the organized syndicates that are really busy siphoning money illegally and on a corrupt basis from the NLC. And we will ensure that when we engage with our colleagues in the Hawks and NPA all of those schemes and syndicates and organized crime must be dealt with effectively. As I indicated, we've received support from our colleagues at FIC, so we will continue to engage with them so that going forward, they could then flag those kind of instances. We want to, again, make sure, Honorable Malimecha, to really ensure that we acknowledge the role played by whistleblowers. Of course, we would like to know proactively in instances of this nature where our colleagues in FIC could flag it proactively. But of course, the whistleblowers play a very important role. And most of the allegations that we receive from whistleblowers, and we really make sure that they are protected, their lives are not at risk. We do all we can to ensure that as we investigate, we do not prejudice or put them in harm's way. And we've got processes that we follow. Honorable Melder, holding the executive to account. Indeed, I want to assure the Honorable Committee that when it comes to consequence management, we look at all levels. It doesn't matter at what level the individual or the person is, including junior officials. I think this was the question raised by Mr. Malimecha. The junior officials will also be pointed out who are involved in all these processes. And including, if there's evidence that points to that, the executive authority and the accounting authority in the form of the board members, and we've already demonstrated that there were actions against, other board members, former board member 1 and 2, and we'll continue to assess the evidence to ensure that we don't let anyone off the hook. Honorable Benz Namase, or perhaps just to conclude on Honorable Melder, yes, on the prosecution side, of course, we will ensure that we refer those matters to NPA and the Hawks and support that process to ensure that the NPA makes an appropriate decision regarding the prosecution. Honorable Benz Namase, I want to pick up on the question that you have indicated. In all government instances where there are traces of corruption, it must be dealt with within the legal instruments. I really agree with that. And the processes that we employ are processes in accordance with the legislation. Firstly, the legislation that regulates our business, which is the SIU Act. And if we make any findings relating to either its referral of criminal offense, the criminal offenses that we identify would have been in terms of the applicable criminal law. Our investigators are appropriately trained to identify that. When it comes to civil litigation, we do that within the framework of the civil law and all other referrals and regulatory authorities. So we want to make sure that the rule of law reigns supreme, to make sure that everyone is dealt with in accordance with the law. Now, the other question is, what has SIU done, or what has SIU adopted to preserve the assets? In terms of our civil litigation powers, we have got the authority to institute civil litigation either to the High Court or to the Special Tribunal. But as I said when I presented, since the inception of the Special Tribunal, we take our civil litigation matters to the Special Tribunal, which was proclaimed by the President in 2019 already. And we have seen that the Special Tribunal it really speeds up the recovery process, the process of cancelling any of the irregular actions that would have been taken by state institutions, including at an early stage where the investigators are pointing out wrongdoing on behalf of anyone, including preservation of assets, preservation of bank accounts, and all other instruments that the perpetrator may have acquired. So in this case, there is an example that we have identified in the presentation where we have made preservations, and those assets will be preserved until the civil litigation process is over. The investigators, I have given strict instructions that we must be even-handed, we must be fair, and ensure that we show the same approach on anyone. Where there is wrongdoing, and we have done a financial profiling, as you can see that part of the presentation is the financial investigation. As part of that financial investigation, we do financial profiling of anyone that may have benefited corruptly, unduly, irregularly. And when we come to that finding, we then institute a process to say we have identified his or her assets, this is where they are, and we approach the courts so that it's done within the legal framework to preserve those assets, so that these people who benefited irregularly should not continue to benefit, and also that they should not dissipate these assets before the process is over. There's a question still by Honorable Benz Nyamase. What remedial actions are taken against directors, professionals, and other practitioners? Just to also assure you, Honorable Member, that in terms of these NPOs or NPCs or other entities, other companies that are involved, when we return an adverse finding against them and we identify their involvement, we also ensure that the actions are taken not against the juristic person, which is the company, but also the individual directors, and will continue to do so, to an extent that these directors should also be declared delinquent if appropriate. And again, there's a legal status, there's a legal approach, there's a legal requirement to declare the directors delinquent and to hold them to account in any particular way. So we will make sure, and all the other professionals, whether it's engineers or any others that are identified, we will ensure, in line with our consequence management approach, that the professional bodies regulating these professions are informed, evidence is sent, and we support that process to hold them to account and take appropriate action against them. I would like to really just welcome the comments by Honorable Mbuyane. Yes, indeed, agreed that we are dealing here with clear evidence of organized crime. And the referrals to NPA and Hawks will be made as soon as we concluded the evidence and the evidence pack and the timeline that we have put. We will ensure that they are referred. Now, in terms of the timelines and the reporting lines, the legislation that governs our work says from time to time, we may give progress reports to the President as required. But of course, we also give status reports to the Honorable Committee. We also give progress reports to the state institutions. But the ultimate progress report is given to the President, and the final report is also given to the President. So we have identified timelines. We said in April, we will give a report to the president, and that because the overall investigation would not be concluded, in law, that would be a progress report to the president. It would be an interim report, which the president may, in his assessment, either make public or make it available to the committee as the committee may request. And the November deadline is then the deadline that the team, after assessing all that needs to be required, and then put that deadline as the overall investigation deadline. And once we have completed the whole investigation, by law, we're required to submit the final report to the president. Honorable Chair, I think those are the questions that were raised by the members. We welcome the comments, really welcoming this presentation and the report to the committee. We will ensure that we stick to the timelines. We will ensure that the actions that we have taken or identified are acted upon speedily in the interest of holding those who are responsible to account. So I would like to pause here, Honorable Chair, and thank the Honorable Chair and the Honorable members for the opportunity to respond. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Advocate. We look forward to the phase 1 report. You say that will be going to the President in April. We hope that you will avail yourself to come and speak to us as a portfolio committee and through us to the people of our beautiful land, South Africa, because we know that with 1 cent that goes to corruption, we are disadvantaging our poor communities. So we are committed by the call of the President to fight corruption. And we note your logo, Advocate, which is a cobra ready to strike. And we're saying strike, strike fast and strike swift, because we want everybody who is guilty of corruption and malicious maladministration to meet the full might of the law. So we thank you very much for coming to us today, and we look forward to further engagements until all corruption is rooted out in this entity. But of course, as the government, we are saying wherever corruption is found, it must be dealt with. Thank you very, very much. I think we can...
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, I think we can excuse the SIU. I see there's a further hand from Honourable Cuthbert. Honourable Cuthbert.
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson. Just to support your suggestion about when that report becomes available, if we can kind of pin that in on our program for the next term to make sure that we set up that engagement with the SIU so that they can take us through the report. I found it very useful for them to come here and explain it to us and provide context, which we wouldn't have otherwise had having read it ourselves. So I think I'd like to support you on that front, and we'd appreciate, the invitation being accepted by the SIU.
Thank you, Honourable Cuthbert. Yes, we are all together in this fight against corruption, but we will definitely program it into our program, our PC program for next term. Thank you very much. Can we have the agenda so that we can move on to our next agenda item, and thank the advocate and his team and whoever else is on the platform for having come here to listen to the presentation by the SIU. We thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Can we be excused?
Yes, you are.
Thank you very much.
Can we have the agenda, please? Is Mr. Hermans off the platform?
No, I'm on the platform. As Margaret is supposed to share the thing. There we go, Chair.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you very much, committee members, for your robust interrogation of this update from the SIU. And I think we will agree that it's work in progress, and we will also make sure that we invite the minister to come once we have the final report, the final phase 1 report. So I think we are doing quite well in terms of time. It is now 10 to 12. It looks like we'll be able to conclude our meeting. We will conclude our meeting, our normal 12 o'clock. And we're doing quite well in terms of time. So our next agenda item is a consideration of the draft program. And I just want to go to a letter that explains why we are looking at a revised program. And we will ask the committee secretary to take us through the proposed revised program. But given the letter that I received from the department, it gives us I'm going to just read directly from the letter. Given, this is the second paragraph of the letter, given the concerns raised by the stakeholders in this round of public comments, that is the round that we just concluded on the, I think on the 3rd of December. Remember that we had, we advertised for inputs. So given the round of that public comments, the department's officials have requested that they be given time to address the technical matters raised during the commentary period. Some of the comments raised have possible unintended consequences to institutions such as libraries, the education sector, and the broadcasting industry. The comments require careful consideration, which necessitate that due consideration is afforded. It is for this reason that the department requests until the end of April to consider the submissions before providing its input to the portfolio committee. That is the letter that was received from the minister, and we have therefore, because we want I think it's in everybody's interest that we have a thorough process, and we take all our submissions that we have received into consideration, and that proper work be done on it. I think committee members, you will agree with me that we will then look at the end of April for the department to come back to us. So if there is no objection from committee members to that request for a postponement, then I will ask the PC secretary to flight the proposed agenda and to speak to the changes. Thank you.
Chair, thank you. Margaret is flight. In light of the decision, Chair, we worked on the draft program for the committee's consideration, and the CAB would have been started, deliberations on CAB would have started on the 8th of March. So technically for 2 weeks, we were required to really look at the program and amend it accordingly, Chair. The first item that we have that changes is on the 8th of March. We were requesting the DTIC to give us a status on the SEZ's, Chair, which is quite important. Then, Chair, on the 9th of March, although the DTIC and SABS and NRCS briefed the committee initially on the Toyota quantum panel, the emphasis was not on the remedial action addressed to the Minister of Trade and Industry. And in terms of the referral, the committee's report should reflect whether they are in support of the action and express a view on that. Hence, we requested the DTIC and NRCS and SABS to come back and focus specifically on the remedial action address and in that regard. Then, Chair, we will then have the consideration of the first draft of the second and third quarter financial and non-financial performance of the DTIC. Chair, we have completed the initial draft of that report. Hopefully with your guidance, we will most likely release it to the members on Friday and we most likely will request for their comments, for the concluding remarks and recommendations in that regard. On the 15th of March, Chair, we will receive a briefing by the Competition Commission on its economic concentration report, Chair, and we will then also formally consider the second and third quarter financial and non-financial performance of the DTIC's report. Then on Wednesday, Chair, we will receive a briefing by the Companies and Intellectual Property Commission on its financial and non-financial performance for the 2021-22 financial year to date, means the first 3 quarters, Chair. And we'll also ask the Companies Tribunal to provide the same to the committee. Then on the 22nd, the program remains exactly the same, Chair. The Minister or the Department will brief the committee on the Economic Reconstruction and Recovery Plan. And then on the 23rd, Chair, we will receive a briefing by the National Consumer Commission on its financial and non-financial performance, Chair, and then we'll consider the first draft report of the Public Protector's report on that day. On the 29th of March, that item remains exactly the same, Chair, where we will get the briefing by the DTIC on a strategic and annual performance plans, which will reflect on SONA and the budget as it relates to its mandate. Then on the 30th of March, we will have a short meeting, Chair, just to consider the formal consideration of the report on the Public Protector regarding to the Toyota matter, and then we'll consider the second quarter program. Chair, all matters that has fallen off the program, we have captured and we will include it in the next second quarter program for this calendar year for the committee's consideration on the 30th of March. So nothing will fall through the cracks, Chair. We've captured everything that was taken off, and that will be considered in the second term. That is the program that we have in front of us, Chair, which we'll then submit to the House Chairperson, because it changes substantially the agenda items on our program, Chair. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Secretary. PC members, there is the proposed changes to the agenda and the reasons why we have changed it. Can I then just check whether there's any I see Honorable Mbiani. I recognize you.
Okay, thank you very much, Chairperson, for the opportunity. Chairperson, as you outlined that there's a letter from the department, I proposed that we adopt the program as it presented by the Secretariat. Thank you very much.
Thank you. There we have a mover for the adoption of the program. Can I check if there's a seconder to that proposal?
Yes, Chair.
Ms. Moaxi, Chair.
Okay.
Chairperson, I second.
Honorable Moaxi, you second it.
Yes,
Thank
Chairperson.
You. Thank you very much. So that
Chair, you muted yourself, Chair.
It's been a long morning. Thank you very much. So you'll circulate the amended amended program then to PC members.
Chair, yes, I will do that, Chair, but also submit it for your signature so that we can submit it to the House Chairperson, because there's a number of changes significant changes to the program.
Okay, thanks. No, that's fine. Thank you very much. That concludes our agenda for today. Can I just ask you to speak to our next meeting as a PC Committee Secretary?
Chair, our next meeting will be on the 8th, where we will receive a briefing by the DTIC on the SEZs, Chair.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, members, for a very fruitful session. Have a very good day further. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Recording stopped.
Thank you.
Long live Chair. Long live the Chair.
You're a bit late today.